The hospital ship floated through the cold dark of space like a beacon of hope. Its white hull carried the bright red cross of mercy, a sign that every nation and every species in the galaxy had agreed to respect. Inside its walls, wounded soldiers lay on stretchers, their breaths shallow but steady. Doctors and nurses moved quietly from bed to bed, carrying medicine, bandages, and whispers of comfort. The ship was not a warship. It carried no weapons, no armor, no soldiers. It carried only the broken, the sick, and the innocent. The crew believed they were safe. No one would dare to fire on a hospital ship. It was against every treaty, every law of war written among the stars. In the galaxy's long history, even the most brutal empires had shown respect for the symbol of healing. The silence of space wrapped around the vessel like a promise. Here, inside these walls, life would be protected, but promises can break. Far beyond the ship's view, in the shadow of a dead moon, alien warships gathered. Their hulls were sharp and black, built for one purpose: destruction. Their commanders whispered in their own tongue, voices filled with contempt. They saw the hospital ship not as sacred but as weak. They wanted to send a message, to test the courage of humanity, to see if Earth truly had the will to defend its own mercy. Inside the hospital ship, a nurse hummed softly as she cleaned the wounds of a soldier. The soldier, barely more than a boy, whispered about his home, about green fields and a river that shone under the sun. She smiled, promising he would see it again. None of them knew what was coming. The first warning came as a faint ripple through the hull. A vibration, almost like a shiver, passed through the floors. At first, the crew thought it was a minor engine fluctuation, but then the alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed across the halls. Doctors froze in place. Nurses dropped trays of medicine. The captain's voice broke over the comm system, tense and sharp. Incoming fire. All crew, brace for impact. The aliens did not send a warning. They did not ask for surrender. They opened fire without mercy. The first blast ripped across the left wing of the ship. Metal screamed as it tore apart. Patients who had been lying helpless in recovery rooms were hurled into the void as their walls split open. The quiet hum of healing turned into chaos. Alarms wailing, fire rushing through corridors, and voices shouting in terror. Medics threw themselves over the wounded, trying to shield them with their own bodies. The captain shouted orders, but there were no weapons to fire back with, no shields to raise. This was not a warship. It was a vessel of hope, and now it was burning. Through the windows, crew members saw the alien ships, their black hulls lit by the glow of their weapons. One nurse whispered, trembling. They know who we are. They know we cannot fight back. The second strike hit the medical bay. Stretchers were thrown into walls. Machines shattered into sparks. The boy who had whispered of green fields only minutes ago screamed once and then was silent. The nurse who had promised him safety lay broken beside him, her hand still reaching for his. The ship's engines failed. Lights flickered. The vessel began to drift, helpless like a wounded animal bleeding in the dark. The aliens circled it like predators, firing again and again, each blast cutting deeper until the proud symbol of mercy became nothing more than a burning husk. But still, inside, humans fought to save lives. Doctors dragged the injured through smoke-filled corridors, pushing them into escape pods. A young medic shouted over the roar of fire, his voice shaking but steady. Get them out! Save as many as you can. They loaded children first, then the most wounded, each pod ejecting into the void with a hiss of air. The aliens saw the pods too. Some of their ships turned and fired at them, destroying them before they could flee. Screams echoed through the comm channels as whole pods vanished in flames. The hospital ship gave one final groan, like the death cry of a giant, before its central core exploded. The blast lit up the stars, a burning flower of destruction spreading across the void. Pieces of the vessel scattered, glowing fragments spinning silently into the dark. For a moment, space was filled with nothing but wreckage, drifting bodies and silence, on Earth and across human colonies. The transmission arrived minutes later. Images of the hospital ship's destruction flashed on every screen. Billions of humans watched as the sacred promise of safety was broken before their eyes. They saw the wounded burned alive. They saw the children's pods torn apart. They saw mercy itself destroyed. The galaxy would later ask why the aliens did it. Was it hatred, fear, or simply arrogance? But the reason no longer mattered. Because in that moment, across every city, every ship, every world where humans lived, the same feeling rose like fire. Rage. Not the cold anger of politics. Not the distant fury of soldiers following orders, but the kind of rage that burned in the hearts of ordinary men and women, fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, who had watched their people slaughtered while helpless. The narrator's voice lowers. Heavy and cold, they thought humanity would mourn. They thought humanity would beg. They thought humanity would break. But they had forgotten one truth. When you strike at the heart of human mercy, you awaken something far more dangerous than hate. You awaken wrath. The screen fades to black, the silence hanging heavy, leaving the audience with a single question. What happens when humanity finally answers? The aftermath. The wreckage of the hospital ship still drifted in the void when the first rescue fleets arrived. Human frigates cut through the silence, their engines glowing like fire in the dark. They came too late. The proud vessel of healing was gone, torn apart, its white cross burned black. What they found instead were fragments, shattered walls, broken stretchers, floating bodies. The rescue crews did not speak at first. The silence was too heavy, too sacred. They moved through the wreckage, pulling survivors from escape pods, searching for faint signals among the debris. They carried broken children, doctors who had lost their hands trying to shield patients, nurses whose last breaths were given in service. Every rescue came with tears. Every face they pulled into safety carried the same expression: shock, grief, rage. One captain of the rescue fleet turned off his comm channel for a moment. He did not want his crew to hear his voice breaking, but his words still carried when he finally spoke. They attacked mercy. They attacked humanity itself. The survivors told their stories. The nurse who had tried to hold a boy's hand until the end. The medic who loaded children into pods only to watch them be destroyed one by one. The captain of the hospital ship, blood still on her lips, whispering, "They fired on us even when they saw the Red Cross. They knew who we were." The transmission spread like wildfire. Within hours, every human colony, every Earth settlement, every station among the stars was watching. Billions sat in silence as the screens showed the blackened wreckage, the faces of survivors, the cries of children who would never see their homes again. Across Earth, anger spread faster than light. In crowded cities, people filled the streets, holding candles for the dead. On colonies at the edge of human space, miners and farmers stopped their work, staring at the stars with clenched fists. Soldiers stood in silence inside their barracks, their hands resting on the weapons they had sworn to wield only for defense. The Galactic Council tried to speak. They called for calm, for diplomacy, for investigation, but their voices were drowned out. Humans had seen the truth with their own eyes. They had watched mercy itself burn. There was no investigation needed. In the chambers of Earth's leadership, silence fell. Generals, admirals, presidents, and leaders from every nation stared at the footage. No one argued. No one debated. For once, humanity stood united. The decision was not spoken. It was felt, like a storm rising inside every heart. One general finally broke the silence. His voice was steady, his eyes dark. "They want to test our mercy. Let us show them our wrath." Fleet orders were given within hours. Ships that had been in repair yards were rushed back into service. Colonies opened their hidden stockpiles of weapons. Old soldiers were recalled. Young cadets trained in days what normally took months. The largest mobilization in human history began without hesitation. Meanwhile, in the alien councils, fear began to whisper. The commanders who had ordered the attack thought humans would mourn quietly. They believed Earth was too new to the stars, too small to stand against ancient empires. But then the reports arrived. The aliens heard that every human shipyard now glowed with light, working day and night. They heard that every human fleet was moving, not slowly, not with hesitation, but with the speed of fury. They heard that the cries of grief had turned into a single vow that echoed across human space. Never again. The survivors of the hospital ship became living witnesses. Wherever they went, crowds gathered to hear their voices. They spoke of the fire, the screams, the broken laws. Their words did not fade. They became fuel for the fire burning in humanity's soul. One young medic, his uniform still stained with ash, was asked what he saw in those last minutes aboard the ship. He answered with a voice that trembled but never broke. "I saw mercy die, and I saw humanity reborn." The galaxy had always underestimated humans. They saw them as fragile creatures bound by emotions tied to their small blue world. But now those same emotions, grief, love, rage, were shaping something far greater than fear. They were shaping vengeance. The narrator's voice turns low, cold, heavy with promise. The aliens thought they had won a small victory. But in truth, they had lit a fire that would consume them. For when humans lose their mercy, the galaxy learns what it means to face their wrath. The screen lingers on the image of the broken hospital ship, drifting silently in the void. Then it fades to black, leaving only the weight of what comes next. The wrath awakens, the fleets of Earth moved like a tide across the stars. What had once been scattered ships of defense now became a wall of steel and fire. Every dockyard burned with light as new vessels rose from their cradles. Carriers that once sat in silence now thundered forward. Destroyers, cruisers, and battleships formed endless lines, their engines glowing like the eyes of giants. Humanity had been wounded, but wounds can harden into strength. The loss of the hospital ship did not break them. It sharpened them. Every survivor's scream, every burned body drifting in the void became fuel. The galaxy had never seen humans move with such unity. Old rivalries between nations fell silent. Colonial leaders who once argued over resources now gave everything freely. The death of mercy had forged a single will. In the war councils, admirals spoke in steady voices. They did not shout, they did not boast. They planned. They mapped the positions of the alien fleets. They studied every weakness, every supply line, every planet. Their orders were not of revenge alone. They were of justice. Justice that would be delivered with overwhelming force. The first strikes began at the edges of space. Human fleets appeared suddenly, cutting through trade routes, surrounding enemy outposts. Alien patrols thought they faced a small skirmish. Instead, they were erased in minutes. No human ship hesitated. No order was questioned. Each battle was swift, precise, devastating. Reports spread quickly. Alien soldiers whispered in disbelief. The humans fight like they do not fear death. Entire fleets surrendered rather than face them. But for those who resisted, the humans showed no mercy. Inside one alien stronghold, commanders argued. Some demanded a retreat, others wanted to negotiate, but a few still laughed at humanity, calling them weak, calling them emotional. Their laughter died when the human fleet arrived at their gates. The bombardment lasted less than an hour. When it ended, the stronghold was nothing but dust drifting in orbit. The galaxy began to tremble. It was not the size of the human fleets that frightened them, nor even their weapons. It was the silence. Humans did not cheer when they won. They did not sing songs of glory. They advanced without joy, without pause, like a storm that would not end until the skies were clear. On Earth, people gathered to watch the reports. Families who had lost children aboard the hospital ship saw justice delivered on distant screens. A mother whispered through tears, "For my son." A father, his face hard as stone, said, "For all of them." These voices reached the soldiers on the front lines, and every word gave them strength. The survivors of the hospital ship traveled with the fleet, standing as symbols of what had been lost. When they spoke to the soldiers, their voices carried fire. One young medic, the same who had watched children's pods destroyed, stood before a squadron and told them, "Remember the hospital ship. Remember why you fight. Do not let mercy be broken again." His words were simple, but they burned like a torch in the hearts of all who heard. Alien propaganda tried to twist the truth. They told their people that the hospital ship had carried weapons, that it was not innocent. But deep down, the galaxy knew. Every species had sworn to protect the Red Cross. Every species knew what it meant when humans showed such unity. Lies could not cover the truth forever. The retaliation grew larger. Human fleets no longer struck only at patrols and outposts. They advanced into the heart of alien space. Worlds that had once believed themselves untouchable now shook as orbital bombardments lit their skies. Cities built over centuries fell in minutes. The aliens had thought themselves predators. Now they were prey. In one shattered council chamber, an alien leader whispered, "We thought they were fragile." Another answered, voice trembling, "They are fragile. But that is why they fight harder than anyone else, because they know the cost of loss." The galaxy learned a terrible lesson. Humans may forgive many things, betrayal, insult, even war. But attack their mercy, destroy their symbol of hope, and they become something no empire can control. The narrator's voice lowers, steady and cold. They wanted to test humanity. They wanted to see if Earth had the will to fight. They have their answer now. The wrath of humans does not fade. It spreads, it burns. and it will not stop until justice is done. The screen fades to the sight of endless human fleets cutting through the stars, a storm without end. The hospital ship may be gone, but its memory now guides a force that the galaxy can no longer ignore. The turning point. The war had spread like fire through dry grass. Human fleets pushed deeper with each passing day. The aliens who once called themselves rulers of the stars now hid behind broken defenses. Their maps, once filled with bold red lines of control, now showed wide scars of black where human fleets had passed. Every border world trembled at the sight of approaching ships. The alien High Council gathered in secret chambers. Their faces, once filled with arrogance, now carried fear. They argued endlessly. Some shouted for peace. Some demanded stronger attacks. Others whispered that it was already too late. They had never expected such fury, never expected such unity. The destruction of the hospital ship had not weakened humanity. It had forged them into iron. In one chamber, an alien general slammed his clawed hand against the table. "They are only human. They bleed, they die. They cannot fight forever." His words echoed, but his voice shook. Another leader answered quietly, "And yet they fight. They fight as if death itself has no meaning. How do we break an enemy who has already lost everything?" Silence followed. None had an answer. Across the stars, human victories piled higher. One alien fortress after another fell. Their fleets, once proud and endless, were scattered and broken. The humans moved like shadows, striking supply routes, destroying shipyards, leaving nothing behind but ruin. Where alien civilians once cheered their soldiers, now they whispered in fear. Children asked their parents, "When will the humans come?" The aliens had thought themselves safe in numbers. Their alliance had been strong, bound by promises of power and wealth. But under pressure, cracks began to show. Some species pulled away, demanding peace before they were destroyed. Others begged for forgiveness, sending secret messages to Earth. The alliance that once stood as one now turned against itself, each fearing it would be the next target of human wrath, and still, the humans advanced. In one battle, alien forces surrendered before the first shot was fired. They lowered their shields, powered down their weapons, and begged for mercy. The human admiral, standing on the bridge of his ship, gave no smile, no celebration. He only spoke 4 words: "Stand down." Never again. The alien commander bowed his head, knowing the war was lost before it had even begun. But not all surrendered. Some fought until their worlds burned. They believed they could outlast humanity. They were wrong. On one planet, alien defenders swore that humans would never land. Hours later, they watched from underground shelters as the skies turned red with bombardment. Cities collapsed. Oceans boiled. When the humans finally walked upon the ash, they did not speak of victory. They only spoke of justice. The turning point came when the alien leaders themselves began to fear their own people. Protests filled their cities. Families demanded to know why they had provoked humanity. Merchants cried as trade collapsed. Soldiers deserted, unwilling to die against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. The war was no longer about survival. It had become a lesson written in fire across every world. Do not touch the helpless, do not break the promise of mercy. On Earth, the people did not celebrate. They remembered the hospital ship, the nurses, the doctors, the children who had died without defense. Every new victory was marked with silence. Instead of cheers, there were vows. Families stood together and said, "Never again will they touch our mercy." The survivors of the hospital ship stood on platforms across human colonies, speaking to crowds. They did not call for hatred. They called for memory. One survivor, her arm still wrapped in scars, told the people, "We fight not because we love war. We fight because they tried to kill mercy itself, and mercy must be protected even with fire." Her voice shook the hearts of all who heard her. The aliens watched these speeches in secret. Some wept in silence, knowing they had brought this storm upon themselves. Others cursed their leaders for dragging them into a war they could not win. The alliance crumbled piece by piece until only a few stubborn worlds remained, clinging to power as their people cried for surrender. In the war councils of Earth, the admirals prepared their final plans. The enemy's core worlds lay ahead. One last strike would end the alliance forever. Humanity stood at the edge of total victory, yet their eyes still carried the memory of the burning hospital ship. The narrator's voice lowers again, calm, but sharp as steel. They thought humanity would be broken by grief. Instead, grief became a sword. They thought unity was fragile. Instead, unity became unbreakable. And now, as their alliance shatters, the galaxy learns a truth it will never forget. Mercy may be fragile, but wrath is eternal. The screen fades to black, leaving the audience on the edge of the final storm. The legacy. The last battles ended not with cheers but with silence. The alien fleets that once filled the skies were gone, scattered like ash. Their leaders surrendered in broken voices, their banners burned, their soldiers laying down weapons they no longer had the strength to carry. The great alliance that had sworn to rule the stars was no more, and humanity stood in the ruins, not as conquerors, not as kings, but as a people who had been forced to remember their own strength. The survivors of the hospital ship walked through the halls of Earth's command, greeted not with applause but with bowed heads. Every soldier who saw them lowered their gaze, remembering why the war had begun. It was not for land, not for power, not for glory. It had begun because mercy itself had been attacked, and mercy had been avenged. On Earth, in the heart of every colony, new memorials rose. They were not statues of admirals or generals. They were not monuments to fleets or victories. They were simple walls, carved with names of doctors, nurses, children, soldiers who had died aboard the hospital ship. Families came to touch those names, to weep, to remember. And above every wall was carved the same words, never again. The new hospital ship was built larger than the one that had been lost. Its hull gleamed white, brighter than snow. Across its sides, in letters so vast they could be read from orbit, stretched the Red Cross of Mercy. They named it Wrath of Mercy. Its decks were filled with the finest doctors, the bravest medics, and the survivors of the first ship who refused to stop serving. When it launched, fleets of human warships escorted it through the stars, and wherever it traveled, alien eyes watched in silence. None dared to fire. None dared even to aim. For the memory of humanity's wrath lingered in every star system, in every broken world that had once defied them. The aliens told stories to their children. They whispered warnings. Do not test the humans. Do not touch their mercy, for their anger is like fire, it burns everything in its path. Generations passed, but the legend remained. The day the hospital ship burned became more than history. It became a lesson written into the soul of the galaxy. Humanity was not the strongest, nor the oldest, nor the most advanced, but they were the most dangerous, because they loved deeply. And when that love was betrayed, their fury had no end. In the Galactic Council, the seats once filled with arrogance now sat in uneasy silence. Whenever a dispute rose, whenever someone spoke of attacking the weak, there was always one voice that asked, "Do you wish to awaken humanity again?" And that was enough. Back on Earth, life slowly returned. Families planted flowers at the base of the memorial walls. Children grew, laughing in the light of the sun, playing in the fields their parents had once feared would be lost. Humanity had endured. They had bled, they had suffered, but they had endured. And though the galaxy now feared them, humanity did not seek endless war. Their fleets withdrew. Their guns fell silent. They returned to what they had always wanted, peace. But this peace was no longer fragile. It was guarded by a memory the galaxy would never forget. The narrator's voice grows soft, steady, filled with cold finality. They thought a hospital ship was an easy target. They thought mercy was weakness. But in their arrogance, they awakened a storm. Humanity's wrath shook the stars, and its echo will never fade. For the galaxy learned one truth. Mercy may be gentle, but when mercy is betrayed, it becomes the sharpest blade of all. The screen fades to black, only the words remain, carved across the silence, never again.